Good morning. Thank you for joining us on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. A lot of topics. We just got done talking about football, college football, the influences of Kyle and Fred Whittingham, and we spoke with the BYU defensive coordinator, Kelly Papinga. Now, the big story still, and will continue to be, is the Jazz trade deadline. And will some more moves be made? Well, they made a huge move, absolutely gigantic, in getting the headliner in Jaren Jackson Jr. from Memphis for some players, obviously first-round picks, Hendricks and Clayton Jr., and gave up the 3 draft choices. And we're going to go to Memphis to get their idea, get his idea of what's going on there and why the move was made and what does he think. Is it Joe Mullinax? He covers Locked On. He does the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Joe, good morning. And when you first heard the trade, what was your initial reaction?
Shocked, because I thought John Morant would get traded first. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity. I don't think I've ever been in Salt Lake before, so this is good. I think that the biggest surprise was the order of action, because John Morant's availability being leaked was the initial piece of all of this, right? That's what started this journey that the Grizzlies now embark on as they start a pretty hard rebuild, it looks like. And in hindsight, it makes sense because the reports have been going into today even that the demand for John Morant is not there, and that's understandable. The John Morant that we all remember hasn't truly been around for, almost 3 years. So whatever the Grizzlies trade Ja for is probably not going to be what Ja would have been traded for 3 years ago, because that guy, again, hasn't been around. Jaren Jackson Jr. has been around. He has played his tail off. He's a multi-time All-Star, multiple-time All-Defensive Team member, former Defensive Player of the Year. He has grown his offensive game in a really substantial way in the last couple of years with John Morant being in and out of the lineup. He is easily, or was, still hard to say was easily the best two-way player on the Grizzlies. And for that choice to be made and for this to go this way will allow for whatever Ja gets traded for, assuming he gets traded today. It makes it more palatable because the Jazz gave up a decent, I wouldn't say a home run swing of an offer, but a pretty solid double in terms of what comes back to Memphis as they get started on this rebuild. So the first thing I thought was surprise because I thought the order would be inverted, but after a couple of days to reflect, it makes sense to do it this way.
Joe Mullinax, who does the Locked On Grizzlies podcast, joining us here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I want to ask you the type of person Jaren Jackson is, because that's important, because obviously these issues with John Morant that have been on and off the floor has led to all of this. And I would assume that, particularly with the gun stuff and the off the court issues, maybe this doesn't happen if he's not doing all those shenanigans. I can't rewrite history. I don't know, but that obviously that contributed to it. So I think it's important that you got to have a big time person too, because they got to show up to work and they got to set the example, blah, blah, blah. He'll be the highest paid guy, at least in the short term. He's going to basically $50 million a year. I saw that he put out on a tweet, "Take note," which has sort of been like the Jazz little moniker,
right,
off the music thing with the "take note." And so that would lead me to believe that he's comfortable with this trade. Can you just speak to your knowledge of him as the type of person he would be and all that goes in with fitting into a team?
He's extremely professional. He's the vice president, I believe, of the Players Association. His father was an NBA player. His mother, very active in the WNBA and in other places in their player organization, that sort of stuff. So he has been shown the way to be a professional basketball player, and that's absolutely what he was for the Memphis Grizzlies. I think that there is a lot that goes into the way that you carry yourself. John Morant gets a bad knock for the suspension and the gun stuff. He hasn't had any issues with that since that time. The suspension he had this year was with a coach interaction with the Grizzlies head coach, Tomas Isolo. So I'm not saying you're saying that. The John Morant issue is availability in all of the forms that it comes in, right? The fact that he's been hurt, that he hasn't played 7 consecutive games in almost 3 years now. That is where the problems with Ja reside. That wasn't a problem with Jaren. Jaren's had injuries. Jaren has missed time. But when he has been there, it's been consistent. He's been a consistent player. There's things that he's consistently not going to do that may frustrate Jazz fans, and we can talk more about that here in a moment. But in terms of the way he'll represent the organization, he was always the guy, whether it was, the Martin Luther King Jr. Day game, that's a big deal in Memphis, whether it was, the end of season, the last home game, he was the guy that talked to the fans, right? He was the guy, thanks for being here, thanks for supporting us. While Ja Morant was the more popular and famous Memphis Grizzly, Jaren was the face of the organization, at least in terms of representing the team, doing charity work. The stuff he did for women's sports in Memphis was extremely important. So I think that he is going to be a wonderful addition to the Jazz, both on and off the court.
All right, that's good news. We watch the NBA, we watch all the Jazz games, obviously, but it's hard to study guys when you're not watching them day in and day out and know completely about them like you do. And one of the things that jumps out to me as far as a potential, if you want to call it this, deficiency, is for a man his size not averaging more than 6 boards a game, basically.
Right.
How much of that is an issue?
I mean, if you have an issue with that, it's an issue. I don't see him changing the way that he plays. But when Jaren has been at his best in his career, he has been able to play next to true centers that kind of take care of that problem for him, whether it's Steven Adams, Jonas Valanciunas, Zach Edey, obviously, most recently. And if I recall, he may not be playing right now, but you guys have a pretty good true center there in Utah that, assuming he returns in restricted free agency, that's not going to be a problem for the Jazz. You have Walker Kessler, who can be that guy like Zach Edey was, and like Jonas Valanciunas, and like Steven Adams was. Jaren thrives where he's able to be a more perimeter-based big. He's one of the best isolation scorers in the entire NBA. He hits the three at a pretty solid clip. The rebounding thing, if you want your 6'11", 245-pound guy to rebound, that's going to make you mad. Like, we've had plenty of people in Memphis in the comments over on Locked On Grizzlies. There was a section of the fan base, I would certainly not say it's the majority, but there was a section of the fan base celebrating this trade because they were that frustrated by having a 6'11", 240. You'll see him and you'll be impressed by his stature, and yet he'll average 5 or 6 rebounds a game, and that will frustrate some of your fans. But if you have a front court that could potentially be the biggest front court in the NBA next season, I don't know how much that matters, and that might be part of the Jazz's logic. They're interested in Jaren, the player, for what he is, not what he isn't.
Right, and that's important to note, too. Joe Mullinax, who does Locked On Grizzlies podcast, joining us on the 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. This is a speculative question, but I want your opinion because you follow the NBA, and obviously you've seen Markkanen's game. And Kessler is going to be a true 5. There's no doubt about it, and we'll see if he gets re-signed and all that. But whether he does or doesn't, that position is probably going to be held by a true 5 who's going to be interested in clogging the lane defensively and rebounding, because they got 2 now highly skilled guys on the wings with Markkanen and Jaren Jackson. So your lineup basically calls for somebody who's going to do the grunt work. I don't think there's any question about that. I assume it's going to be Kessler, and we will until we hear otherwise. But the point I'm asking for you is, how do you think he's going to mesh with somebody like Markkanen, who's a highly skilled big man himself and can do a lot of things at basically all 3 levels of scoring? And how do you think that's going to go with Jaren Jackson's game?
It's going to be fascinating to watch how the Jazz build this roster, because it could be one of those situations where they start together. Like, I don't see a world where Jaren Jackson Jr. comes off the bench, and certainly Markkanen won't either. But maybe they play a lot separately, if that makes sense. Having a player like Markkanen or even Jaren, I guess, in theory, as your 3, depending on matchups in the NBA, it's awesome to be that big, but you're going to have some teams that are going to be able to run around you a little bit. I'm curious moving forward if that's your starting group, but then you have Markkanen slide down to the 4, and Jaren is one of your first guys out in the rotation, if that makes sense. And then Jaren comes back in and replaces Markkanen. And maybe they start games, finish games together, but a lot of the actual work of the game itself is going to be in the more traditional 2 big kind of situation. I could see that happening. It all comes down to how well Markkanen, I suppose, in particular, really is able to take to that lateral quickness, the need to defend, and it's going to come down to coaching, right, and how they're going to adapt their schemes. Okay, now you have one of the biggest starting front courts, if not the biggest starting front court in the National Basketball Association. How do you maximize the strengths of that, and how do you minimize the weaknesses? That's what coaching is putting your players in the best position to be successful. I think Markkanen is a well-tooled player enough that they can make it work, but I also think it's malleable enough that it allows for them to really do some interesting things with their rotations moving forward.
Jaren Jackson is a former Defensive Player of the Year, which gets our attention. Rudy Gobert has won that award several times for the Jazz. Speak to the type of defensive player he is.
He's excellent in terms of weak side rim protection. He's very good at timing his blocks. That's part of the reason he has the foul issues that he's had in the past is he goes up for blocks. They call him the Block Panther for a reason. I think that he is somebody that is really going to thrive as long as he's next to a true big. Because, again, you're going to see him, you're going to think, oh, man, if this guy played the 5, imagine all that's possible. He can do that, but that's not his strength. He's really at his best where he's able to be that weak side help defender, clean up the mess that maybe happens on the perimeter. And that also could be part of the Jazz's thought process. If you pair him or at least keep him as close in defensive hedging and rotations with Markkanen as possible, if somebody does blow by Markkanen on the perimeter, you've got Jaren there to help him on the back end. I do see him having a time of transition. It's important to note that Jaren was taken by the Grizzlies in 2018, drafted by the Grizzlies in 2018, and his defensive potential was always there. That was the major point of excitement when he was drafted. I was there on draft night when he was selected by the Grizzlies 4 overall. I do think that the Jazz are going to have to find ways to make sure that if they want him to get back to that Defensive Player of the Year level, and there were flashes of that this year, it has to be as that weak side help defender. You're not going to say, okay, he's the Defensive Player of the Year like Marcus Smart was or like somebody else was, and you just man him up and say, go. It has to be similar to Gobert in that allowing him to be that rim protector, make things more difficult in the paint, and that's going to be, the job of Kessler, the job of Markkanen. Jaren is an imperfect star. There are specific parts of his game that are flawed, but if you build around him with people that complement, yin to the yang kind of idea, then he's going to be maximized for you. And we've seen that in Memphis, and I have all the confidence in the world that can be done in Utah too.
The Block Panther. I love wordplay.
Panther.
Who gets credit for that?
The Memphis Grizzlies do. I don't know who in the fan base did it, but that was as part of their goodbye video that they posted on social media. That's been his nickname for a while, but they reminded us of Block Panther. Yeah,
I like it. I hadn't heard that. I didn't.
Feel free to take it. But yeah, it's yours now.
Yeah, there we go. We will use that. Yeah, we know, obviously, in the world of sports, fans get attached to players. And I saw on social media, him with little kids and one little girl just jumping up and down, so excited that he's giving her the ball or something. And so when they leave, whether it's through retirement, trade, whatever, free agency, if they're especially popular, fans, they don't like it. And I'm wondering, how does Jaren Jackson fit into that? Because I think that also demonstrates your character. And you don't have to be a star. Joe Ingles Joe Ingles now is coming to basically sit on the bench for Memphis. And he was a free agent. They signed him. And his first year, his rookie year, he came on. We've been doing this show for almost 24 years now. My partner's off today. But he came on weekly, literally weekly. He was alone in a foreign country when he first got here. He ended up being married and all that and has kids. But he came on every week without fail. Maybe missed 2 or 3 times in the span of 8 years. Every Thursday, he would come on and do we call it Joe Ingles show, right? And so then the Jazz go into the rebuild, and he gets traded off Portland, and then he signs with Milwaukee. He comes back. And you would have thought that the reception, it was just short of like what Stockton and Malone and maybe Hornacek would have got. I'm wondering the type of, not just reception, but just type of feeling that Jaren Jackson had with the good folks of Memphis.
Not quite that strong. I do think that Jaren is going to get a lot of solid reception because I think the Grizzlies and the Jazz play in like a week and a half or so, maybe 2 weeks. And
Right.
I think it's in Memphis. I'll have to double check that. But, that'll be an interesting quick turn. Yeah, well, that's exactly – we'll find out. I think because of the immediacy of that, I think he'll get a big response. But at the same time – Jaren is not Zach Randolph. Jaren is not Marc Gasol, Mike Conley, Tony Allen, the group that we affectionately call the Core Four. That group, they got the most out of their era, if that makes sense. Because when you think back to that era of NBA basketball, Marc Gasol, Mike Conley were probably the two better overall players. Marc Gasol eventually won a championship with the Raptors. Mike Conley somehow has been traded twice in the last 24 hours, bless his heart. The one active player from that era still. But that era made the Western Conference Finals. That era built an organic identity of grit and grind. When you hear grit and grind and associated with Memphis, that's because of those four guys, especially Tony Allen, who coined the moniker. But the way that they played, the way that they lived it, the way that they loved Memphis, I think Jaren did a lot of those same things, but the organic connection was not as strong. So while I think Jaren will be well received, I don't think he's getting boozed by any stretch of the imagination. I think that what's going to hurt Jaren's legacy long term in Memphis is the fact that they underachieved. This era was supposed to be something more. You had the one true superstar in Ja Morant. That's the only superstar the Grizzlies have ever had, and we're talking about salary dumping him today. Jaren was the 1B to Ja's 1A or 2 to 1, Robin to Batman, however you want to phrase it. And it's very possible that he gets a much better trade return than the star does. And there's a lot of things that have happened over the last few years that have led to us being where we are. But I think the bad taste in the mouth of how all of this is ending maybe unfairly is going to hurt Jaren, at least in the short term, with fans. I don't think he's going to get booed by any stretch of the imagination, but he's not on that next tier pedestal with the true legends of the organization to this point. It's still a young franchise, but we do have a few legends that have been established. I don't know that Jaren is fully there. I think he's somebody that'll be appreciated more in the long term.
All right. Hey, Joe, we thank you for your time. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay, that is Joe Mullinax. He does the Locked on Grizzlies podcast. Jaren Jackson still the story as he's coming. A little dismayed, Yak, that the one true superstar is Ja Morant. I would like to think that Jaren Jackson could be that player if you're paying him $50 million a year.
Yeah.
You don't want him to be a role player at that kind of money. I mean, that's the fact. If you pay somebody $50 million, he needs to produce big time. Now, Jaren Jackson has made all-star teams, and so maybe he can up his game. He's still only 26, so he has the opportunity. And now it looks like he's going to be here for the long term, and he's going to be in a better situation. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think, obviously, this is not a breaking news story by any stretch. They need high-level production out of this man immediately. Not now, but once we get to October of this very calendar year, then yeah, absolutely. It is go time, and he needs to perform and needs to play as much and as well as possible because they got a major investment into this guy.
Well, and that's the funny thing about this, PK, is he's going into a max contract that actually hasn't kicked in until next year when he actually, is going to be playing full time for the Jazz. So, yeah, they're taking on a massive amount of money here, and the expectation is going to be commensurate with what he's going to be expected to do.
Absolutely. Well said. He needs to produce at a maximum contract level and Marketing too, and everybody for that matter. But, he's the new kid and he's the new guy that you just gave up a fair amount for. I don't know that he comes cheap. Obviously, in his annual salary, he doesn't come cheap. And what you gave up for him would indicate that he is someone that you're going to be counting on. So I'm not going to put a ceiling on him. I'm not going to say, well, I don't know the level of stardom he had in Memphis because I'm not watching it. I just look at their stats, and he's got decent stats, but he's got to be a big-time player for them. He's got to be – if he was a 2 to Ja Morant, so be it. But he needs to be – if he's not a 1, he needs to be a 1A in Salt Lake for the Jazz. I think I'm comfortable saying that. And, maybe he ends up being better. Maybe he is the best player, and Marketing is a 1A. And then I would like to see Keontae George be a 1B. If you don't have a top 10 player, then you better have 3 really, really good players, and maybe they could have that, hopefully for them and for the fans and for us who have to cover them, and we'll enjoy covering winners. that's the case, and we'll see how that develops. It'll be a story going forward, obviously, a big story, and it'll continue to be. Now, as far as winners, yeah, BYU basketball, you ain't it. We'll get to that next. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
This is JJ and Alex. I got this.
I want you to go off a little bit more about how the rebuild is over. A trade like this hits harder when your team has come as far as the Jazz have come, and especially County George.
What the Jazz did today was take a huge leap forward to the point of not only is the rebuild over, this is who we are. We have potentially 3 All-Stars in our starting lineup with young players who have the potential to also become All-Stars, Ace Bailey and whoever they're going to take in this upcoming draft.
Right.
We're not only going to compete and try to make the playoffs next year, we're going to be a force. Take us seriously now. We have a lineup that you must take seriously. We're going to compete at a high level moving forward, and you don't have to worry about all this stuff and all this pain. The pain is gone. Now you're going to enjoy the fruits of your labor. This team's going to be really, really good next year as long as they stay healthy.
Catch JJ and Alex afternoons from 3 to 7 on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Is that those circles from Posty?
Our good man Post Malone wearing his Fiesta Days hat on national television the other night. Yes, sir.
At the Grammys, yeah.
Singing
Spanish
War
Fork Rodeo,
Pigs.
is that what it was?
Yeah, it was the Fiesta Days, which is the Spanish Fork. Yeah, the rodeo.
Yeah. When do they have that? Is that the one in July? Is that when they
It's
have
like late July, early August, if I recall.
that? Yeah. Sure. Yeah. What is that? He lives up by the canyons, Cottonwood? Is that
Cottonwood
Sandy?
Heights area, yeah.
Cottonwood Heights, Sandy area? Yeah. Oh, man. If you live in that area, you got big money. Oh, and he's got big money. I kind of live in that area. Mike Weir lives in that area. Been up there where he lives. Good for Post Malone. He is the guy who is always pumping up Salt Lake. I think he's doing he's doing another tour that it ends at Rice Eccles. Did I hear that?
Yeah,
this coming summer.
It's his stadium tour. Funny enough, they're doing a second year of it. It started last
Is it
year
Cherry
at
Bowl?
Rice Eccles, and then this year's version is going to end at Rice Eccles this summer.
Yeah, that guy, wildly talented. Kind of a strange looking dude. I mean, yeah, I noticed. Yeah, there you go. I said it. But wildly talented, that's for sure. That music ability, he has it, and he has large amounts of doses of it because he can crank out the hits. Okay, speaking of not cranking out the hits, BYU basketball. What are they, 5-4 now in league?
Correct.
And have lost 4 of their last 5? Oh, my goodness. And you got Houston coming in. And Houston was on playing UCF before the Cougars and the Cowboys took to the floor. So I'm watching that game. And Houston and UCF's thinking that, man, we're on the verge of cracking the top 25, blah, blah, blah. I get it. They had a little momentum going on. And the game's in Houston, and the Cougars destroyed them. They're the best defensive team in the conference. I mean, I haven't looked at the numbers, but looking at the eyes, I don't necessarily need to look at the numbers. They guard the heck out of you, and they got some athletes, and they're coming in the Marriott Center. I think that's a late game. Is it 8:30 Saturday night?
Yep, our guy Fran Fraschilla will be calling it.
Oh, good. I love Fran Fraschilla, man. Covered him when he was in the Mexico coach many years ago. And he told me, boy, they put me in a cowboy hat and cowboy boots, and I'm from New York City. I was out of place. I said, Fran, I know what you're talking about because I moved just across the bridge out to Arizona, and I was not a cowboy. I may have liked watching the Cowboys, but I was not a cowboy. It took me a little bit of time to adjust. And obviously, Fran has been an expert here in the broadcasting industry and evaluating talent. So looking forward to that game. But my goodness gracious, watching BYU play, I couldn't have been more disappointed. You gotta tell it like it is. I mean, somebody described me as obnoxious, but he tells the truth. Well, I don't think I'm being obnoxious, but I believe I'm telling the truth. That is just not near good enough. You've allowed 2 teams now to score 90 points in a 40-minute game. Oh my goodness. And I'm a Rick Majerus disciple. We talked about Kelly Papinian, who's he's a disciple of, as we had him on. You can get that wherever you enjoy your podcasts, as DJ would say. And talking about who are his mentors. Well, when it comes to basketball, covering Majerus for 10 years when I worked with the Watchdog, that had a major influence on me. And everything was about defense. That is for sure. Defense. Allowing so many easy shots at the rim. It's shooting over 50%, which would be indicative of scoring 50 or 90 points, and turning the ball over as soft as they were in the first half. What the heck was that? Come on. Now, these kids, you're getting money, man, so you can amp up the criticism. And Kevin Young is getting a lot of money, and I can amp up the criticism, and it's fair criticism, and it needs to be said. They need to be held accountable. Right now, this is a bleep poor performance. You got anything positive to say, Yak? You're a positive guy. I'm not. This sucks.
Well, yeah, there's nothing – you can't defend what they did last night. And the funny thing about this, PK, is what's been their big issue defensively most of the year? It's been defending the perimeter, right? Well, last night they held Oklahoma State to 7 of 21 shooting from the perimeter, so 33%. Not awful, but not great. But then – so you defend the perimeter a little bit better, and then you allow 52 paint points? Yeah, there's no defending what they did. You have 99 points in a college basketball game. They're struggling. That's about as kind as I can be right now.
Yeah, and this is unacceptable. This is not the way it was supposed to be. No. Okay, you lost a close game to Arizona. You lost a close game to Kansas. And you had the lead late in the game in the second half against Tech, and 2 of the 3 are out on the road. Okay, and Arizona's ranked number 1. I believe in the next day or two, Tommy Lloyd will be on the midday show, is what I was told. So he coaches Arizona. Look forward to that. And with that in mind, you had to win to get back some mojo against the Cowboys. Again, you let them race out to a 15-point lead, and you basically gifted them that 15-point lead because they were scoring off of turnovers.
Yeah, they had 8 in the first 10 minutes.
Yes, you were so stinking soft with the basketball. Come on. No. Show some toughness, show some grit, show some heart. Now, they got back in the game, and then they went up by 5 or so in the second half, and I thought, okay, they got it under control, but nope. Here come them Cowboys once again, another opponent just having no fear of BYU. And they stormed the floor, fine. It was the first win, a quad 1 win in 2 years, whatever it is. All right, whatever. But beating BYU is no big deal anymore as far as I'm concerned. Now, they still have time, but we've been saying this for weeks. They still have time. We're running out of time, man. And Houston, you're going to drop to 5-5? How are you going to spin that? Put the question up on Facebook. What is wrong with BYU basketball? Ryan, didn't spend enough money. Where's Crumble Cookie to the rescue this time? Well, I mean, it is not. They are a bunch of crumbling cookies. They got to get going. Brady, I don't understand how their defense is top 25. There's no urgency at all on defense. They're always chasing their man and won't contest shots. They turn the ball over way too much, and that is 4 A's. So it's way. I get it. KY needs to bench Davis Jr. He's got to mix it up because the current lineups and games are not clearly working. Hopefully the losing streak isn't a quick, swift kick and you-know-whats and wakes them up. Yeah. The problem is I don't know what Kevin Young can do personnel-wise. Playing time. Seems like you're sort of rearranging the chairs a little bit. Ball went in the hoop way too much for the other team. Thank you, Jim Boylan. Depth and these coaching. I believe that you win as a team and you lose as a team. And so if you want to single out individuals, fine. But I believe it's everybody. Now, obviously, DeBonsa, what did he have, 36? So he's scoring. I just don't want it to get to the point where he's thinking, okay, I got another 5 weeks of this, and then I'm off to the NBA, so I'm just going to get mine. I'm not saying he's going to do that.
Yeah, but to your point,
you keep losing.
Yeah, you keep losing, and it could turn into that. The one thing about AJ last night is, he scored the 36, but he had moments in that game. He helped them propel them to that. They tied the game at halftime. He had a big dunk at the end of half, that 19-4 run, and it felt like they may have kind of turned the corner at that point. But then, to your point,
right,
as the second half wore on, defense just went to complete tatters, and they had no adjustment, and that's the concern. You mentioned the fact personnel wise, I don't think they have anybody they can throw out there. They threw out Dominic Diamande. They threw out Alexei Kostas. These guys who are deep on the bench right now to see if they had any juice, and none of it worked. So, yeah, it's pretty broken right now.
Yeah. Robert says nothing. Big 12 has good to great team, and most of them are better than BYU. Is Oklahoma State better than BYU?
Okay, on last night's results, sure, but
are they better than BYU? I don't think so.
On paper, no, but they do have the result now.
They do that, but that shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have happened whatsoever. And maybe this will motivate them. Maybe it's time to kick butt a little bit. The Bonds had, at one point, he did have more turnovers than points, and KY did take him out of the game. So that's good. He put him back in. I mean, I think I don't know that I can look at individual player A, B, C, D and say, you're the problem. You must go to the bench. Kennard Davis now has some big – the guy who's the whipping guy, and I'm not sure – that's really all on him, because if you allow a team to score 99 points, I think that's not one individual who's at fault. So they've got to take a look at themselves, and we can talk all the cliches we want, but it's all about performance. And right now they just don't have it. I mean, missing Dawson, I mean, we're going to make excuses. Dawson is the guy. He's the defensive stopper.
No, he's not the defensive stopper, PK. That's right. Dawson Baker is your sixth man offensive weapon. That's what you're missing.
He come in and shoot, give you a spark.
And that's not what the issue is. They scored 92 points last night. The offense is not the issue.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I like to see DeBonsa take over. Just say, boys, if we're going to go down with me leading the way, shooting and doing all that I can do. I'm totally fine with that. You just wonder, and this is out there, and it's got to be me, the one who's going to say it, because I don't know that it's going to be said. Are you bypassing some LDS talent for some other guys that you think might be better, but are they really better? And then once you get down to 7, 8, and 9 in rotation, don't you need those guys to just be role players anyway? Now, I was told that they didn't recruit the big man who's at Clemson, who was at UVU and played at Corner Canyon. I'm not positive on that, but that's what I heard. And this guy can help them. So maybe you need to look at more guys that Dave Rose would call them squad guys, who can come in and they're grateful to be at BYU. It's not a transaction for them. They're not coming to BYU because they can get the money, and that's why, and then they can play for a winning team. They're coming to BYU because they want to be at BYU.
Okay, so I will just
some of those guys.
I think you are, and I will just say this. I think there is a contrast between the BYU football program and exactly what you're describing, where look at BYU football, PK. They may be the only Power 4 program that retained every top guy on their roster that had eligibility remaining, and that doesn't happen in this era of the transfer portal. And I think it screams more to what you're saying, is that they're there because it's BYU, and BYU basketball may be where, sad as it is to say, it's more of that mercenary style.
Right. And I think that's a worthy discussion. It's a hard discussion to have. People don't want to hear it. I get it. But it's worthy to discuss, and maybe Kevin Young needs to figure that out. There was a time when BYU was having losing seasons in football 20-some years ago, and they were bringing in some kids, and it didn't work. And that might have been some character issues. I'm not saying that that's the case here by any stretch. I'm not intimating or insinuating that whatsoever. But the point I'm making, you got a couple of top-end guys, and that's great. But you need those role guys who, if you want to get out on the floor, you're going to have to defend, and you're going to have to do the grunt work. We got top-end stars, and it's all well and good to have top 10 draft picks. But and last year it did well. It translated into a Sweet 16 appearance for a program that doesn't make many Sweet 16 appearances. And maybe this year, and hopefully this year they get there, and maybe they're going to have the last laugh. But right now, they're not giving enough effort. They're not doing what they need to do, and they need to be called on it. And I have no problem being a person along with others to do that. And I expect more, and so do the fans. And hopefully for them, they'll get to the point where they get more. All right, we got hockey. We talk about the Grizzlies coming up at the top of the hour. Reset what we've been talking about a little bit. Stay with us right here, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson.
Big trade. Whoa, including the Utah Jazz.
Okay.
The Utah Jazz are trading for Jaren Jackson Jr.,
Whoa.
John Conchar, Jock Landale, and Vince Williams for Walt Clayton, Kyle Anderson, Taylor Hendricks, George Niang, and 3 future first-round picks. This is a huge trade for the Utah Jazz.
Wow, that is a huge trade for the Jazz.
Jaren Jackson Jr. is exactly the type of player the Jazz have needed to come in and cement the front court, right? He's going to come in and be a major defensive piece for the Utah Jazz.
You know, one thing that the Jazz have not really utilized with Lowry Markkanen that Cleveland did was they put him at the 3, and all of a sudden they were the biggest team in the league by a mile. I don't know how this affects their plans for Walker Kessler, but if you start Walker Kessler, Jaren Jackson Jr., Lowry Markkanen as your front court, they're huge. And then Ace Bailey goes into the back court.
You've got a stew going, as they like to say.
Got yourself a stew going.
You're really cooking there at that point.
Catch Jake and Ben weekdays from 10 to noon on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
The John Watson Northern Utah High School Players of the Week Award honors the top boys and girls prep basketball players each week during the high school basketball season. Our winners this week were Izzy Wyaskett from Clearfield High School and Elliot Bendinger from Woods Cross High School. Wyaskett scored 21 points to lead the Falcons to a win over Bonneville in Region 5 action last week. Bendinger had 28 points and 9 rebounds in an overtime victory over Alta, then added another 19 points in a rout of Skyline. See why new and used car buyers give John Watson Chevrolet more 5-star reviews than any other Chevy dealer in Utah. John Watson Chevrolet, your 5-star Chevy dealer.
All right, there you go. The preps of the week, as nobody does preps better, man. I got 2 soccer and 2 prep guys that I work with on a daily basis. David James Stigledorf III and Jacob F. Hatch.
F, cool. I like that.
Yeah. And that has nothing to do with your GPA at BYU.
I sure hope not.
Preps are important. It's a changing audience, but it's a constant audience. When your kids are in it, you're way into it. And then you move on. And you end up, depending on how many kids you end up having, you may be into it for 15, 20 years. It just depends as far as that goes. But it's an important part of life. It's a great opportunity for the boys and girls to participate. I am a big fan of all that. And can you take it too far? Yeah, I'm at the top of the line when it came to that. That's for sure. So I've got to give a shout out to the preps. And I also have to give a shout out to the Utah State Aggies. You know, I've been to the pit many, many times. I've been to the pit. I enjoyed going there. But Yak, their media food sucked. They'd give you a voucher for just a boiled hot dog, and you had to stand in line to get it. Yeah, it was
no green chili.
No. At least in my day.
They got some of the best food in all of America. Speaking of like New Mexico, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, that area, that green chili and everything inspired, and they're giving you a coupon for a hot dog.
That's what they would do. So what we would do particularly when I was covering the Utes, I covered the Cougars there too. But when I was covering the Utes, we would go just right adjacent campus there. There's a place called Quarters, and it would be packed with Lobo fans. And I would go when we would play there when I was covering the Utes, and the place would be packed because the Utes had great teams then. And I'd go with Bruce Woodbury, who was a sports information athletic administrator, and Bill Markoff, my guy, Bill Markoff. Love the man. I love Bruce Woodbury for that matter, too. Both of them are deceased. I think about them often. I made great memories at that time because we'd go and they'd get, and it was a Southwestern barbecue place, and they would get like the 36 plate ribs, right? And then they'd fight over who had more ribs than the other guy. There'd be 3 ribs left. who would get two, who'd get one, and it was a tradition. And it's funny when you're growing up on. I mean, obviously I was an adult, but when you're going through life, you end up doing some things that you don't realize when it's gone, that it was really going to mean something more to you, almost more than it did, maybe even more than it did when you're actually doing it. And now that both those guys, they were legends in their own fields, that they're both gone, that, oh man, I miss that. I miss going to Albuquerque, going to quarters, eating there before the games, and then taking the short drive over. And I don't know if Scotty does that, or probably not, because he's got, I don't even know if he knows about it. But I got to give a shout out to the Aggies for going into the pit and beating the Lobos, who was a first place team anyway. I mean, not anymore, and beating them by 20. And Jared Calhoun, we got to get Scotty on at some point, and I'll ask him. A lot of these Aggies coaches that have left they've all had a string of success, but is my guy, and that's Odom and Springer. They've moved on. Is Calhoun the best of them? Is he up there with Stu Morrill in recent times as a great, great basketball coach? Because when I watch them play, man, they sure look like they know what they're doing. And they're a fun team to watch with the new guys that he brought in, and Templin is a holdover, and my guy, Mason Falslev, local kid from up there, great player, can do pretty much of everything. The guy's a winner. He's a winner through and through, man. That is for sure. Phenomenal athlete. He can help you win ball games, man. Just a great player for Utah State. So I'm excited to see what they do. They're at Wyoming on Saturday as we start to move down the stretch of the conference season, about a month to go with 9 games or so, depending on how many you've played left. So I want to recognize Utah State Aggies for coming up with a huge win in New Mexico, which I know full well, covering BYU and Utah, that's a tough place. Okay, I'm going to talk some hockey. The Mammoth are off for the break, and the Olympic hockey, which begins today, gets going. I think the women are on the ice, and then they go. Opening ceremonies tomorrow. We'll have all that stuff available for you to watch on KSL TV Channel 5. Do not miss any of it. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to talk to Cole Bagley, our KSL Sports Insider for the Mammoth. Stay with us right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Whether you're stuck in the